So welcome to ARMA's EPR webinar series. This one being the first one and a special one just for the producer responsibility organizations, otherwise known as PROs. My name is Alana Yim, and I'm the Chief Communications Officer for Canadian Strategy Group. It's my pleasure to serve as facilitator for ARMA's EPR webinar series, and I would like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. ARMA works with Albertans from all areas of our province and acknowledges the Indigenous peoples who lived among and traveled through the land in the area currently known as Alberta. The relationship that peoples of Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, Alberta's Métis and Inuit people have with the land is founded on a deep respect for the environment. This connection forms the foundation of our responsibility and vision of inspiring a future without waste. Before I turn it over to the ARMA EPR team, just a few housekeeping items to cover. As we're mindful and respectful of everyone's time, registrants will notice that your audio has been turned off. We ask that you use the Q&A function to submit questions you may have and encourage you to do so as they come to mind. We have ARMA EPR team members as well as subject matter experts with us today who will answer questions as they come into the Q&A and chat windows. They are Kim Tyke-Grobe, Manager of Compliance from ARMA, Annie Lamb, Change Lead from ARMA, and then with us, our special consultants and subject matter experts, Peter Hargreave, ARMA's consultant on policy integrity, and Nahani Falens, I hope that I pronounced that correctly, Nahani, ARMA's legal consultant. If the team is unable to get to your question or the questions from today's sessions, they will follow up with you afterwards. ARMA will also be continually updating the EPR FAQs on the ARMA website as well. For those that haven't found those FAQs, they'll just continue to grow and expand as we collect questions. Lastly, these webinar sessions are being recorded and will be made available on the ARMA website afterwards. But with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ed Guggenheimer, CEO of ARMA. Over to you, Ed.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. As Alana had suggested, this is our first Kick at the Cat of doing a webinar. I've been told not to use Kick at the Cat, but I'm an old guy, so I keep using old terminology. So again, really appreciate all of you attending. I think some of you may have seen some of these slides before, but the team is always looking to enhance and add more information as we build it and move forward. So next slide, please. So just a brief overview of what we want to cover. We're going to be talking about this introduction and going through some of the pieces that you've already heard. We're going to be talking about the EPR framework, looking specifically at our regulations as well, and different parts of our team will be walking us through those. We're going to talk about the system overview, next steps, and hopefully answer any questions that you may have. And I hope there's lots of questions because these webinars are intended for us to learn as much as you are to learn. So, and we learn from those questions. So hopefully we get some rich conversations moving. Next slide, please. So I'd be remiss. I mean, Alana had alluded to some of the new team members, and here's a picture of the small but mighty crew. And I got to tell you, this group of people have been working very hard here at ARMA to make sure that we make this as seamless as possible for all stakeholders, and that includes the pro organizations which are here today. Our intention is to build something that's unique in Alberta and make sure that works for all parties. So this is the small and mighty crew that has been doing all the work for us, and I applaud them, and I'm thankful that I have them each and every day. So when you do see them, make sure you stop and say hi. Next slide, please. So as you know, EPR is a new regulation in Alberta. It focuses on shifting that responsibility from recycling from local governments and taxpayers to producers and recycling materials who create and recycle materials. Probably nothing new for the folks on this call, but the model shifts and holds producers responsible for the products that they generate. And of course, the goal here in this province is to recognize that producers are probably the best position to influence product design, make strides towards a circular economy to maximize the valuable use of resources that are embedded in those products. Next slide, please. So a lot of people, a lot of stakeholder groups actually came out and really wondered how ARMA could possibly provide oversight when they were actually sort of a quasi-government probe. But our roles associated with EPR are very different than ARMA's stewardship programs. But I also think it's important to distinguish the difference of government versus the role of ARMA. This slide, we try to approximate and break down it's that summary in a very simple way. So the government of Alberta, Environment and Protected Areas Ministry, they're there to determine goals, outcomes, direction related to the designated materials. And you know what those are at this point in these EPR programs. They're there to make sure that the legislation EPR framework is solid, that there's good policy direction, and they're there to ensure that we get intended outcomes. They also oversee the performance of me, and believe me, we've got a contract, and I think I've alluded to this in several presentations. That contract is quite strong, and to make sure that I'm following my oversight mandate. It also engages with ARMA on necessary matters related to the agreement, the act, or the regulation. And they actually enforce contraventions against the act or regulations. So we can do certain things as an oversight body, but ultimately, when it comes to ultimate enforcement, it's with the province. On the flip side, the role of ARMA as oversight, we're here to develop and maintain bylaws. I think some of you have been included in some of those conversations in the past, and the operational policies that align with the government framework to support the implementation and ongoing operation of this EPR system. We're here to make sure we implement those policies, procedures, and deliver a level playing field to all, and ensure that we have a strong compliance program in place. We're here to develop and maintain that registry system. So in our case, that's ARMA Connect, and manage and maintain that and use it for reporting back to the province. We do engage with impacted stakeholders. You're one of those stakeholders in our world, and with a focus on oversight operations as they pertain to the outcomes on non-designated materials. We're here to educate and inform stakeholders of the roles and responsibilities through strategic communications and efforts to distribute proper information. We're also here to design appropriate performance measures and assess the performance of the EPR system once it's in place, with the objective of continuous improvement and achieving higher environmental outcomes over time. I mean, that's what we've done in our stewardship programs, but I think the opportunity here is far greater. We also have to report back to the province on how the system's operating, the outcome set and regulation, keep the ministry informed of any issues or concerns that sort of crop up over time. Next slide, please. So our approach, and if you've heard us speak before, you're going to understand that we're looking for an Alberta-made solution. We had the ability to look at what's happened in other jurisdictions, and predominantly the province looked at BC and Ontario, and so we looked to those two jurisdictions to figure out how we could shape a model that worked in Alberta. Understanding the nuances of Alberta are different than in other provinces, and our regulations a little bit different. But I will tell you, we remain committed to consulting and working with everybody in the system, and this is one of these. This webinar is one of the methods that we're using to reach out. So producer responsible organization. In our world, it's going to be processing facilities and communities that we'll be working with. We're confident that creating a system that works in a smooth and achievable way will actually allow for EPR to move through in a much more efficient manner than it has in other provinces. The goal truly is to minimize the amount of red tape and unnecessary processes. Sometimes regulation can get in the way, but I think regulation is not in the way at this point in time. So we think we're going to try and optimize the programs that we have and the policies that we have. We're also looking for opportunities like innovation. We're trying to enhance recycling percentages across the province. We're really interested, and it came from even the ministers and the premiers' offices, that they're really looking at the circular economy and putting a focus in on it, and keeping Alberta's environment clean and clear for generations to come. So with that, I think, I've spoken enough. We have somebody who's absolutely fabulous and a much better speaker than I am to probably take over at this point in time. So Gabby, wondering if you can step in.
Thank you so much, Ed. So as Ed mentioned, working with the government of Alberta, ARMA is supporting a government-made EPR framework that will allow us to work with our partners to do even more to reduce waste and make our province a more attractive place for investors. So the EPR regulation supports two product streams: single-use products, packaging, and paper products, PPP, from the residential sector specifically, and hazardous and special products, HSP. Next slide, please. We are working very hard to harmonize Alberta's framework with other Canadian jurisdictions to ensure a consistent approach for producers where possible and where it makes sense. We recognize the importance of this as it simplifies compliance for producers, but also fortifies our collective efforts towards a sustainable future. Having said that, we also want to take into account the unique characteristics of our province. So these distinctions are not roadblocks, but rather opportunities for innovation within our EPR system to meet the desired outcomes for the Alberta landscape. Over the next few slides, we will outline some of these differences across the two programs. We will start with the producer exemptions in PPP. So PPP producers may be exempt from registration and/or reporting if they meet certain criteria for exemption. Please note that there are no producer exemptions for HSP in Alberta. The first criteria is organizations with a charitable status. These organizations are exempt and have no obligations to register. The second criteria is a revenue threshold that evaluates a producer's annual gross revenue. If the producer's annual gross revenue in Alberta is less than 1.5 million, the producer is exempt. This consideration ensures that smaller businesses, which form the backbone of our economy, are not overburdened while still being part of the environmental stewardship conversation. While they are not required to register, they must keep financial records to demonstrate that they are under the revenue threshold if an inspection is to occur. The last criteria is a material threshold. If a producer's revenue is over 1.5 million, but they are under all material thresholds, amounts which we will take a look at on the next slide, these producers will still need to register with ARMA and provide a supply report annually. However, they will not be required to pay program fees or participate in the common collection system. Next slide, please. For each PPP material type, there is a weight threshold for each category of designated material generated. The weight thresholds for PPP in Alberta's EPR system are, for each calendar year, 2 tons of paper, 2 tons of rigid plastic, 2 tons of flexible plastic, 1 ton of glass, and 1 ton of metal. To be considered exempt under this criteria, a producer would need to be under all material threshold levels, and this is an important point. Again, the producers will be required to register with ARMA and provide a supply report annually, but they will not be required to pay program fees or participate in the common collection system. If a producer's revenue is greater than the threshold and their supply of designated materials into Alberta is over the material weight exemption threshold for any material category, they are an eligible producer subject to registration, reporting, fees, and collection. Next slide, please. Now, the regulation establishes distinct minimum collection requirements for single-use products, packaging, and paper, as well as hazardous and special products, as shown on this slide. For PPP, communities with existing curbside recycling must have pickups at least on a bi-weekly schedule. For communities using bin collection systems, typically for multi-family residences, they should schedule pickups according to the volume and size of the containers. Areas without current recycling services are mandated to start receiving them by October 1st, 2026. And by October 1st, 2026, recycling collection for PPP must align with existing waste collection services. So for example, if a community has curbside waste collection, it should also have curbside recycling for PPP from this date of October 1st, 2026. Now for HSP, for larger communities, so that's a population over 125,000, they must have one permanent collection depot for every 125,000 residents. For medium communities, a population of 10,000 to 125,000, they will require at least one permanent collection depot. And for small communities, that would be a population of 1,000 to 10,000. They should hold at least one collection event annually. And for our very small communities in Alberta, so that's a population under 1,000, they must have one collection event per year, provided the community expresses interest through registration with ARMA. Next slide, please. So it's important to note that the Alberta HSP program encompasses a more limited range of designated materials compared to similar programs in other provinces. The following are included in the Alberta HSP program: batteries, corrosive materials, flammable materials, pesticides, and toxic products, as shown in the box at the top of this slide. As an example of the jurisdictional differences, paint and oil filters are managed under the extended producer responsibility programs in jurisdictions like Ontario, but in Alberta, these materials fall outside of the EPR program's purview. The reason for this is the presence of established stewardship programs that specifically handle these materials in Alberta. To illustrate this, the management of paint is under the jurisdiction of the Alberta Paint Stewardship Program, while oil filters are captured by the Alberta Used Oil Stewardship Program. And now you've heard enough from me, so I will pass the presentation over to my colleague, Victor, to take us through the next portion of the presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Gabby, and thank you for joining us, everyone. So I'll walk everyone through some of the considerations we've made regarding our IT system, which is our registry build. So I'll start with talking about the stakeholders that we have to consider within the EPR system here in Alberta. Like Ed mentioned earlier, we got four principal stakeholder groups, each with a unique role, and there's a unique timeline for registration as well. For community, which is defined by the regulation as cities, towns, villages, municipal districts, special municipalities, improvement districts, special areas as per the Special Areas Act, settlements as per the Métis Settlements Act, and Indian reserves. So in terms of registration, communities are requested to detail their current service for both PPP and HSP, such as existing recycling programs, curbside pickups, and range of materials recycled. This is the primary stakeholder group we've been working with since October, which community registration was the first group to be available for registration and to understand their needs and making sure they are supported throughout the EPR implementation. The second stakeholder group are our producer groups, which I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with. Producer registration will open on November 27th. And beyond manufacturing and selling, producers are responsible for the product lifecycle management, including post-consumer stages as part of the EPR regulation. Within our regulation, we look at producers through a hierarchical lens. So the primary responsible party is the brand owner residing in Canada. And if absent, the next in line is the importer based in Alberta, followed by the retailers that reside within the province. Third, we have our producer responsibility organization. So that's everyone here. And registration for pros started on October 23rd, and this will end on November 17th. And the intent of this is to align with the producer registration timeline. So this ensures we have the necessary arrangements in place to launch producer registration. And as each group is integral to the framework and success of our EPR system, we want to ensure that specific functions are fulfilled and contribute to the overall goals of the EPR system. Finally, we have our processing facilities, and they handle the receipt, recycling, downcycling, treatment, disposal, and the export of designated materials outside of Alberta if they were meant for export. Processing facilities must not have any affiliation with pros, and they are asked to provide information regarding the material types they can handle, their processing methods, location, and capacity of their facilities. So specifically for producer responsibility organizations, in order to operate in Alberta, there are two key criteria outlined within the regulation. The first is that a pro must not have affiliation with any entity or individual that provide recycling or waste management service. This requirement is to ensure unbiased and equitable management of the responsibilities entrusted to the pro. And second, pros within the province must be established as a not-for-profit entity. And this underscores the commitment to reinvesting in the system and prioritizing environmental stewardship over profits. So meeting these criteria not only align with the regulatory framework, but also reinforces the integrity and purpose of pro within our EPR system here in Alberta. In terms of how we designed the system, we looked at the obligation of each stakeholder group that's involved within Alberta. And we have established them into 4 separate categories. So there's the registration, the collection system, the supply reporting, and management reporting. For communities to be part of our system, communities need to register with ARMA, and registration for phase 1 has begun and ends on December 31st. And this guarantees the eligibility for receiving recycling service starting April 1st, 2025. Communities can still register after this date, but the recycling service will not commence until at least October 1st, 2026. And for communities, if they're interested in participation, registration is the only obligation they have to be part of the system. For producers, any producer who introduce whether PPP or HSP materials into Alberta are required to register with ARMA and engage with the province's EPR system. Producer can opt into the common collection system, or they may propose an alternative collection system which they manage themselves. For any alternative collection system, they must work with ARMA and receive approval prior to commencement of operating an alternative collection system. And they must also submit annual supply and management reports, with the very first report being due on June 30th, 2024, covering all materials supplied in the 2022 and 2023 calendar year. For pros who are looking to operate within Alberta, they must register with ARMA, and then they can be appointed by producers to manage and report on supply and management activities on their behalf. Generally, pro are also operating the common collection systems. So for producers, even if they are not looking to work with a pro on supply or management report, they would generally need to work with them at least on the common collection system. Finally, processing facilities must register with ARMA in order to participate. And for pros who are looking to set up a common collection system, they must work with registered processing facilities as well. So now I'd like to turn our attention to how we've designed the EPR registry and the essential information it offers you as a pro within our system. So the EPR registry here in Alberta is crafted to be a comprehensive database, which ensures transparency and facilitate access for all involved parties. As a pro, you are granted access to specific data curated to support your operational needs within the system. In developing this registry, we've been meticulous in reducing administrative burden, and the upcoming demonstration will highlight some of the streamlined process that we've considered when it comes to registering for producers. And aligning with feedback we've heard, we significantly reduced the amount of initial information required from producers and have empowered you, the pros, to oversee this process on their behalf. This approach not only simplifies the entry procedure, but also delegates the management of these details to those who are most equipped to handle them, and that being you, the pros. So for each other stakeholder group, being the community, the producer, and processing facility, there will be information that flow through the system to you as the pro, and we'll cover that in the next few slides. So as a community, at the time of registration, communities will be asked to provide a set of comprehensive information. These will encompass administrative and waste management contacts, demographic details such as population size and housing data, along with description of current waste or recycling service in operation. Additionally, communities will provide data, if available, on annual tonnage of designated materials collected. So all of the information we are asking from communities will be accessible to all registered producers and pros, equipping you with a deeper understanding of each community's specific needs and pre-existing waste management infrastructure. And the purpose of this information is to present a clear picture at the time of registration, which should serve as a baseline for integrating community recycling operations into the EPR system as we implement. From producers, they are still required to complete a short registration process, which entails providing information about the type of designated materials they supply and assign any reporting responsibilities to a pro if they wish. So as a pro, you will receive these delegation requests and have the ability to confirm the partnership once an agreement with the producer is established. This confirmed delegation allows both parties, the producer and you, to modify the agreement as needed to ensure continued compliance and alignment with EPR obligations here in Alberta. Each producer is obligated to provide ARMA with the following details. So we'll ask them to have their account creation so that they'll have to do on their own. And from there, they can set up the registry, they can register with the information as mentioned above, and then you'll receive the delegation request and be able to update any specific delegations for each producer. Finally, for processing facilities, the registry will display a list of active and registered facilities completed with some of the fundamental details, such as the type of materials they accept, the processing methods that they use, and their operational capacity. And this information will be available to you for all active and registered processing facilities to assist you in identifying suitable facilities for collaboration and ensuring you have you can effectively fill your EPR obligations. By providing a clear overview of facility capabilities, our goal is to streamline your selection process and allow you to have an effective partnership with these facilities within the EPR framework. All of this information above will be available to you directly on your Pro portal. So for supply and management reports, you will also be able to submit the report from your portal for each producer as well, and that is under development at this time. So a quick overview on the timeline on what all of the information we just talked about looks like. So starting at the top, this covers the periods of October 2023 to June 2024. Community registration has started since early October, and for phase 1, that will go until December 31st, with phase 2's registrations follows right after. The community registration information will be available for producers and pros within the ARMA Connect system starting next week. And similarly for processing facilities on the very bottom, registration started on October 16th, and that will be ongoing as we implement the EPR system. And the information specifically related to processing facility is currently aimed to be released by December of this year. And for both stakeholder groups, as different communities register, once we activate the registration, that information will be immediately available to you through the Pro portal that you can access. For pros and producers, Pro registration is ongoing currently and will end November 17th. Producer registration will start on November 27th and will go until the end of February. After that date, if a producer is currently supplying material into the province, they will be considered non-compliant if they haven't registered by the end of February. And of course, ongoing new producers will be able to register throughout the system once it's operational. Once producer registration starts, as a pro, you are able to have notifications sent to you anytime a producer provides the delegation request, having you as their pro. And that, of course, will also be ongoing as new producers come online. So after registration, the first deadline for producers is that verification plan, which has a due date of April 1st, 2024. And shortly following that, on June 30th, is when the 2022 and 2023 supply report is due. And now I will take you through what the ARMA Connect portal looks like, specifically for producer registration, as well as the producer management for pros. So the screen we're showing here is when you log into the ARMA Connect portal, and if you have already registered with us as a pro, this screen should be very familiar to you. This is the landing page for ARMA Connect. And because ARMA Connect and ARMA itself operate both stewardship programs and EPR oversight, you will be able to see both programs on your homepage. And the focus of our demo today will be within the EPR section of our program. So for both PPP and HSP, they are separate programs to register for producers. So depending on the material type that the producers are supplying into Alberta, they will register either for the designated material type or both registration if they're supplying all material types. So once a producer clicks on register or registering a new role, they will be taken to the role selection page. The role selection page allows the stakeholder to pick the role they are looking to register within the EPR system. So this is a common landing page for all stakeholder roles, including producer, producer responsibility organization, processors, and community themselves. So if I were a registering producer, I would choose the producer role. I will click on next, and we start looking at whether a producer will be exempt based on some of the regulations. So the very first thing we ask a producer is whether they are a charitable organization. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, charitable organizations are exempt under the EPR regulation. So if a producer do state that they are a charitable organization, they will be taken to the exemption screen, stating that they are exempt based on their charitable status. If they are not a charitable organization, the next thing we look at is whether they hit if they're exempt based on their annual gross revenue. So the annual gross revenue for exemption in Alberta is under 1.5 million. So if a producer enters under 1.5, similar to the charitable organization exemption, they will be alerted that based on their information they provided to us, they are currently exempt under the regulation. If not, this is where we take them to answer some basic questions related to their business. And really the key information we're looking for at time of registration is the business start date, the first supply date of any designated material into Alberta, and just a high-level summary of the type of materials they do supply. The last thing we ask is whether they are part of a franchise. And this is due to that if they are a franchisee, the franchisor of that company will need to register on their behalf. So if you're not part of a franchise as a producer, then the last section for registration really is that pro delegation, pardon me. So once you provided some of the basic information, we ask if they are working with one or more producer responsibility organization. If the producer does not pick that they're working with any producer responsibility organization, then that is the end of their registration. So we will provide a summary information on all of the data they've provided, and they can submit their registration. I will note, even if a producer picks that they are not working with a pro at the time of registration, the system does allow them to go back on their homepage to select pros after the fact. So if a producer is interested in working with pros, then we ask them to select the pros they're interested in working with. Because even if a producer is working with a pro, they are still able to do their own supply and management reporting. So we do provide them the option to determine if they would like to do supply or management reporting rather than delegating that responsibility to a pro. Within our EPR system, we do allow for partial reporting. So if the producer and pro both plan on providing a portion of either supply or management reports, we do accommodate for that within our EPR system. If they are not sure which pros that they're going to be working with, they have the option to state that they intend to work with pros but are currently undecided, and they are able to select the pro at a later time, similar to if they picked at the time of registration, where they are not planning on working with a pro, but changing their mind after. Other than that, they're able to search for a pro, and this search functionality will show all active and registered pros within our system. So if we have not approved or activated a pro, then they will not show up for producers at the time of registration. And that's why we stagger the pro registration. So for all pros interested in operating in Alberta, we will have sufficient time to receive all applications and approve or reject them before producer registration launch. So had a producer not selected that they intend to work with pros, this is what the search screen looks like. For each pro, we will show the producer the designated material types that the pro will look after. So if a pro looks after only one or many materials within each stream, the producers will know if they need to select additional pros to cover all of their material designated requirements. We will provide a confirmation for all of the pros that the producers have selected. And once they've selected all of the pros that they would like to work with, they can submit their application. So we provide a similar summary screen as if the producer did not pick any pros. And this will be the end of their registration once they submit this form. So that is the process for a producer registration. Once a producer submits their registration as a pro, so this would be the pros homepage. Once your account is active and approved within our system, one of the tabs you have is My Producers. And so My Producer is where we will show all producers that are either interested or is actively working with you. The My Collection and Management System will be where supply and management data will be submitted. Community data is where you will be able to look at the information that community or community authority have submitted on their behalf, and that's where you can download information related to community. So on the My Producer screen, this will show you any active or pending producer relationships. So for producers, if they submitted a request that you have not responded to, it will show the producer, it will have a status of pending, and everything else regarding supply and management report is to be confirmed because you haven't had a chance to respond. So you're able to respond to requests specifically from producer. For any active or relationship that's established, you can update that relationship. And for any that has expired, you can view those as historical records as a pro. When responding to a request from a producer, the producer responding screen will show the producer name, the status will be pending. You will be able to enter the service start date of the agreement that you've come to with the producer. You will be able to indicate whether you are doing supply or management report on behalf of the producer. And the last thing we ask for is attestation or the actual agreement between you and the producer so that we have a copy on our records. Once you've provided all of this information and confirmed that you have the factual agreement as stated, you can accept the delegation from the producer, and this will establish the relationship between you and that producer, and the system will react based on the supply report, management report choices between you and the producer. So once supply and management report comes into play, those will be generated based on who is delegated that responsibility. So if you as the pro has selected yes for supply and management report, then those will be generated for you to produce for the producer once that time comes. for any active relationship, the one thing that we allow you to edit is really just the service end date. So whether you're updating an existing agreement or if the agreement has been concluded, that is where you can update the service end date to either extend or terminate that agreement between you and the producer. If you have a new agreement that has different supply and management reporting delegation, then we ask that the producer to submit a new request for a new relationship. And the main reason behind this is for us to keep a record for each agreement that you may have with the same producer. So that is what we have planned for the demo for today. And really looking at the producer registration, and where we've highlighted the change from our initial registration is to provide delegation, and where you as a pro can manage those delegation with your producers. Just going back to the presentation. In terms of next steps, so after registration, if you have not already registered, then once November 27 comes, that's where you can work with producers to work out the delegation, whether offline or confirming that in our system. From there is the verification plan. That will be the next key milestone, which is due by April 1st, 2024. And finally, the supply reporting will be due for June 30th, 2024. And I think that concludes the presentation portion, and I will turn it back to Alana to help us with the Q&A.
Thank you, Victor. So yeah, we pretty much, because it's a nice small group and it's obviously quite a targeted group. Welcome everyone to pop in their questions into the question and answer, and as you can see, the team will be working to either type the answer, or actually I would look to the ARMA team. I think with some of the questions that we're seeing coming in, if we've got some time, we've got 15 minutes here. If you want to answer it verbally too, by all means, turn on for the presenters to turn on your mic and have at her. I'll read out the first question, and then I'll put it out to the ARMA team to pop in and see who would like to answer that. So our first question is, can pros still register after November 17th? What about new entrants?
Okay, Alana, I'm happy to take this question. So our bylaw does require that a pro register with the authority within 30 calendar days of setting up an agreement with a producer. So pros will have an opportunity to register after November 17th. However, I must stress that it is best for the pros to register before November 17th, because then when the producer registration opens on November 27th, we will ensure that your pro name is within the producer registration so that they can select your pro. So as you can imagine, if you're registering after that date, then we will have to make a change in the system and add your pro in at a later date. So again, that's why we have this 1 month window that we're hoping any interested pros will be able to enter into the system and register as a pro, so that we can include you in the system prior to the launch of our producer registration, which opens, as Victor and Ed and I mentioned earlier, on November 27th.
Thank you, Gabby. Next question. Could you please go over portal allows partial reporting? Once again, I am unsure what partial reporting means.
Yeah, I can take that one, Alana, and thank you so much for the question. And really, what we mean by partial reporting is that we allow both producer and pro to submit data into their supply or management reporting if they so choose. So if there are data that for some reason the producer wants to provide themselves directly to us, we will aggregate the data between what the producer provides and the pro provides. So we just allow the option for submission from both stakeholders. So if both stakeholder groups have indicated that they will do some part of their reporting, then really what will happen in the system is an instance of that supply or management report will be generated in each of your separate accounts, and you can provide information separately that gets aggregated in the back end once the supply report or management report is due. So we just allow, all that means is we allow both parties to enter data if for some reason that is desired.
Thank you, Victor. Next question we have, when will pro registrations be activated? Our registration is currently approved.
I can take that one as well. So for any pro that have registered, our goal is to have everyone approved and activated by the end of this week, knowing that community data will be available starting next week.
These are great questions. Thank you, everyone. Next question, will there be a registration guide for producers?
Yes, so we will have similar to the community registration procedure, we will for sure have one for producers as well. That will be available prior to registration opening on the 27th.
Thank you, Victor. Richard, you have your hand up. I don't know if you are able to speak. I'm sure that you can. You could try. Or pop in your follow-up question into the Q&A box might be the easiest thing to do right now. That was our last question for now. So if there are others, certainly we encourage you to pop them into the Q&A. While we see if there's any other questions that come in, knowing that it is a smaller group, I'm always in favor of giving folks time back if people are feeling that they are that they have their questions answered. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have someone who's raised their hand, Richard from Product Care Recycling, but I think that you can, I'm sorry, we're doing a whole bunch of just coordinating right now in terms of, Richard, do you want to pop in your question into the Q&A box?
I think you just did, Alana.
Oh, I needed to scroll down. There we go. Okay, so for proof of contract, our current process is that producers agree to terms and conditions. They don't sign a contract per se. How will we prove to ARMA that we have a contract in place?
So I think, from our perspective, we really were hoping that the pros would actually be signed up with the program prior. But our process will be a manual one. So I think you'll have to reach out to the EPR team here at ARMA and go through that process with them to ensure that you have a contract. I would highly suggest if you're not registered with the program, you should do so, because validating that you're a pro in our system is the key point in the regulation. And so as many contracts as you can create, you have to be able to create those, and you have to be registered to do that, which means you have to follow the criteria. So it's a little bit cart before the horse, but again, reach out to the EPR team when you do have those contracts in place.
Thank you, Ed. Everyone can see the EPR email address on the screen, as well as a QR code. And if you haven't already scanned it, we certainly encourage you to do so. Yes, Peter.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so it may be helpful to get a bit more information from Product Care on their approach. I'm assuming there's some kind of a participant agreement that is signed between producers. I think that's what Richard is referring to when he says agree to terms and conditions. If that's what he's referring to, I would assume that would meet the requirements of I think what ARMA is looking for as part of understanding that or ensuring that the relationship is in place.
We certainly welcome and encourage questions to be emailed to the EPR team as well.
Thanks so much, Alana. Yeah, I see, Richard, that you said you're going to reach out. We're happy to have a phone call or answer over email. So reach out even today and we can get back to you. Thanks so much, Peter. Thanks, Ed.
If there aren't any other questions, we are happy to sign off. But as I mentioned, please do email any other questions that you may have or that come to mind to the EPR address that you see on the screen, and the team will certainly get back to you right away with an answer. And if there needs to be a bit of digging into finding the answer, they'll definitely let everybody know. As I mentioned, we are looking to and will continually be expanding the FAQs on the website. So all of the questions coming in are very, very valuable and something that we have been tracking, and we just continually add in there. The questions are very helpful because it allows the team to just continue to adjust and pivot in being able to anticipate questions that's going to come along the way. So with that, thank you very much, everybody. We were able to keep it to a tight 1 hour, and appreciate everyone's time. And we know that it was a bit of a short notice for the pros to find the time to join today, but we appreciate everybody's time. And again, anytime, please do reach out to the ARMA team. They're very, very responsive. So with that, have a wonderful day, everyone.